welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to today's episode of BTC Presents Spotlight Interviews. And today we have with us former WCW manager who has managed the likes of Ernest the Cat Miller, Kaz Ono, Kensuke Sasaki, Bull Nakano, Psychosis, La Parka, and most notoriously, the Ultimo Dragon, and a man that I feel invented the selfie, Mr. Sonny Onoo. Sonny, how are you doing today, sir?
Really good. Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
Anytime, my friend. You are welcomed here anytime you would like. So, how are you doing these days?
You know, I've been fortunate enough that, you know, I see a lot of guys who, you know, some of them have a hard time letting go in the business and that kind of thing. And you know, it worked out really well for me. The timing was, you know, when I went away in 2000, timing was good in the sense that I have 4 kids, 2 daughters and 2 boys, and they were, my oldest was in I believe he was in sophomore in high school. So to be able to be home and watch them play soccer and wrestling and that kind of thing, and you know, so I got to really enjoy watch them grow up. So, you know, I was fortunate in that. And the timing it turned out to be a pretty good thing. And I was in a business before, and I had a martial arts schools and a gym that I owned, and I also owned a car dealership, and you know, I invested in real estate. So I've been fortunate that you know, I kind of retired, you know, 17 years ago. When I say retire so that I don't have to do anything. You know, I don't have to get up and have to go find something to put a food on the table. I set myself up pretty good so that I didn't have to do any of that stuff, which allows me to do what I want to do. And any work that I do now, I still consult for international business, generally in Southeast Asia, China, Japan, Korea. You know, currently I'm working and consulting with Fight TV, FITE TV, which have about 400,000 plus app driven internet television, which concentrates on MMA, pro wrestling, you know, boxing, anything to do with fight. We put it on there, and they do a lot of interviews and stuff like that. So I've been pretty fortunate, you know, being able to do what I want to do when I want to do it, and be able to, you know, have a good living.
Well, that's always a good thing. You know, it's always good to be able to be around for your kids to watch them grow up. You know, I've seen and heard the stories where there's a lot of guys, you know, that are in the business, and they don't get the opportunity to spend as much home time, so to speak, with, you know, with their family because they're constantly on the road. I mean, some guys like Triple H, for example, he's where he's at in his life now with, you know, being a corporate guy, so to speak. He has that opportunity to, you know, be back and forth and work close to home. But, you know, you get other guys that are still doing the indie circuits that are not really, they're trying to, like you said, put food on the table, as opposed to being able to have that downtime.
Yeah, you know, it's a tough business. You know, back in a height of pro wrestling when I was involved from 95 to 2000, when everybody was getting, because there was competition, everybody was making a lot better money and that kind of thing. But end of the day, you know, it's still, you're on the road. I was on the road about 222 days a year, and you know, the actual boys who wrestled, you know, they're on the road 300 a day plus. So, you know, I don't know what the divorce rate for people who's in business, but you know, it's got to be pretty high because you're not home.
Hey, I mean, I've seen and read interviews nowadays and articles nowadays that, example, you get female wrestlers that end up traveling, end up being on the road with people, and you know, there ends up being connections. And I mean, the most notorious one we've all heard about was Lita. You know, she was with Matt Hardy. Matt gets injured. She's traveling on the road with Edge. Next thing you know, her and Edge are a couple.
Yeah.
You know, it
well,
happens.
What do you expect? You got. I mean, I'm not making excuse for boys or the girls on the road, but you have connection with people who's traveling, working every day, and you're with them more than you're with your spouse. I mean, and God forbid if you bring your spouse to the road, who knows, that happens. You've seen horror story all over that one. I mean, Kevin Sullivan and Chris Benoit. That was an angle that turns out to be a shoot. I mean, and tragedy that follows after that. So, I don't know what the answer is, but it is tough. But I was fortunate enough that I had business before that I went into, I was doing other things before I went to pro wrestling. And so.
Right. You were doing, if I'm not mistaken, you were a martial artist. You did it for about 10, somewhere between 10 and 15 years.
Yeah, I had a school. I mean, I started martial arts, when I was a child. But I was doing martial arts. Had my own business, having a club and school and a health club that I own. 20 years prior to getting into the business. So,
right.
I was fortunate that I knew how to conduct myself in a sense that I knew it was a ride. And I knew it wasn't going to last forever, and I was fortunate enough and had opportunity to invest in real estate. So, which keeps me, keeps the bread on the table, and fortunate that I don't have to go, flip a burger somewhere, So
right.
And because of my international business and being able to speak English well enough. And being able to be fluent in Japanese, I get to, even to this day, like I said, I work for a company right now called Fight TV. So I was 2 weeks ago. I was in Japan, negotiating a deal for them to bring All Japan Pro Wrestling to Fight TV. So that's going to be, I'm going to bring All Japan a pro wrestling program into United States audience. I also did a deal with Wrestle One. So we'll be getting Wrestle One on Fight TV. So, there's stuff like that I get to do, and I get to go talk to my old buddies like Kaz Hayashi. By the way, I never managed Kaz Ono because Kaz Ono is my son, and he's actually a collegiate wrestler. So, but you're thinking about Kaz Hayashi.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Hayashi,
my apologies.
Yeah. And Kaz no sweat. Kaz Hayashi now, they named him about 3 weeks ago. He's the new president of Wrestle One now. So
really, because I remember him. I remember seeing matches of his in New Japan as well.
Right. So he worked. He worked at places, everywhere, and he's been with Great Muta, who is now the chairman of Wrestle One. So, but the day-to-day operation, day-to-day decision will be made by Kaz Hayashi. And matter of fact, 3 weeks ago in arena in Shinjuku, I managed them. I did a kind of cameo, managed them in the show. So Japanese audience got a kick out of that. So I get to stay in business when I want to stay in business. But it's not something I have to do, or I do it because I enjoy it.
Right, you do it more for the fun aspect of it.
Absolutely, So I'm
I gotta
very
know,
fortunate person.
when you went out with them. Well, I got to know, when you went out with them, did you do the infamous selfies, taking them with the guys as you're walking to the ring?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting enough. I mean, they weren't called selfie back then, but and I'm sure otherwise there was other people before me was taking pictures of themselves. But
right.
Day in and day out, every night or every Thunder, every Saturday night, every time I made an entrance, I was taking, now known as selfie with little Fuji camera, So I was probably, safe to say, I'm the first person to consistently do it on television, on weekly TV shows.
You did it before Kim Kardashian did it.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
but it's great though, because
they call
like
me
you
as
said,
the
you did it with
selfies.
Great, because now you actually have now. Was there actual film in the cameras?
Oh yeah. Well, it's interesting enough. I would use, obviously, because of my character and being Japanese and all that. I would use back in the days. You had two choices of those throwaway Instamatic 35 millimeter camera. In a little cardboard box, which was the Fuji version, and in a green box, and there was a yellow version, the Kodak. So I would come out with my Fuji camera and take a picture. And matter of fact, at one point they were going to sponsor one of the pay-per-view, and it was $1 million deal on the table, but we couldn't do it. At least what I was told, that we couldn't do it because we had the Time Warner had a deal with Kodak. So.
But I could see the irony there because, you being built, originally coming from Japan, and then Fuji being a Japanese name, I can definitely see the irony there.
Yeah. So,
and it's great because you can look back at those pictures now and say, you know what, this was cool. I remember this, and I remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a good time, and I was, it was a fortunate. I rode the wave. I started out doing just being a consultant to make sure the New Japan business and WCW requests and stuff gets through smoothly, and that was my job, and that led to bringing, when the Nitro and Thunder came out, we needed talent, so we kind of, per se, with their blessing, New Japan's blessing, Eric Bischoff went out and hired many of the New Japan contracted talent, such as Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Scott Norton, a lot of those guys. We got him on the WCW contract, because on the WCW contract, New Japan with New Japan's agreement, they could use WCW talent on request. So
it was more or less talent sharing.
Yeah, and they were on the WCW contract, but it was a way for New Japan to save money, at the same time be able to have access to all the talent, everybody from Kevin Nash on down, who worked during that period of time, worked for New Japan, on their big shows like Osaka Dome shows and stuff like that. So it made them bigger than life, and allowed us to have more talent, so we can use international talent like Masa Saito, Kensuke Sasaki, Jushin Thunder Liger, Kanemoto, so we had a great talent that we can use when we did the World War III pay-per-view, which was New Japan versus WCW, which was kind of
right. It was, I believe, it was a best of 7.
Yeah, it was a prelude to. And that was kind of, I remember having a discussion with Eric, and it was too bad we can't do a company versus company deal. And that's when we came up with New Japan versus WCW. And I said, too bad you can't do WWE versus WCW. And that's when the concept came about, where Scott and Kevin came over and started the NWO, which was kind of like New World Order was, kind of like they were representing, they never said it, but, the premises was they were representing the enemy, which was WWF at the time.
Right. And there was a lot of speculation. I feel, if done right, I was speaking to, I believe it might have been Jimmy Corderas about this. It might have been someone just in a discussion, but because we just had Jimmy Corderas earlier this week, that when DX showed up at Nitro, there were people that were in complete shock. And if they would have opened the doors, the question has always been, what if they would have left the doors open? What would have happened? Because in my opinion, the money that could have been made between both companies, although everybody would have switched to Nitro because they already had the fixed cameras, they had the booms and everything like that all set up, for their in-ring show, and all WWE would have had was the cameraman that was going with them.
Yeah, and the truth is, that was a shoot. They actually did come in and try to disrupt our television taping. And you're right.
Which they never acknowledged it on air on Nitro.
Yeah, even if Eric would have, I mean, I think Eric talked about it and the interviews since then, that if he would have been really thinking, he should have let them in, and because they could have came in, but they would have had no rights to, it would have been a shoot. So WWE couldn't shoot it in there, but we could because it was our show.
Right. And I think that could have been, and even if that would have turned out to be something once a year, if they would have done, or even if it was just a one-time thing, we'll take our champion and put him against your champion, which I believe at the time was Austin, and I want to say it might have been Hogan. Don't recall the date on the incident.
Yeah.
But it would have been something to see.
Well, the thing about what is wrestling? Wrestling is no different than you watching a television show or what it is, a television show. But you go and watch a movie. You spend money. You paid you $10, and you don't sit in the seat and goes, well, we're really not flying through space, and and the main character then really get killed. You're not saying that while you're watching a movie. You want to be suspended in that reality on the screen. And that's and the good wrestling talent and good wrestling show is what they try to create. So the more you can blur the line to a certain degree, is better, because the audience aren't sure if this is real, or maybe they really did get mad at each other, which does happen a lot, believe it or not,
right,
in the matches and stuff. And so it could have been done. And the truth is, competition is good for business. And if you look at the rating back in the days, combined rating between Nitro and the Raw, they were doing better rating than most network shows.
Right.
And what's amazing to me is, wrestling is not like what it was back then because of competition, but where did that other 3 to 4 point of rating people, where did they go? Because once the dust settled and WCW Nitro went away, they didn't translate into a big rating for WWE.
Right, because it all comes down to competition.
Yeah, so where did you would think all the wrestling fans should have, at least 80% of it should have transferred to Raw, but that never happened. So
right, because I believe it was because you had your diehard WCW followers that were basically like, I will never watch WWE.
Yeah,
they just kind of fizzled out.
Yeah, and end of the day, it hurt the business. It hurt the business in the sense that it hurt the business, the company, their bottom line. It hurt the talent because now there's no competition, so that pay you as much. A lot of guys. Most of the guys got a pay cut, from their existing contract. I know that for a fact. They got called in the room and says, hey, we're not going to keep paying you, what we agreed to, so we're going to have to restructure your deal. So a lot of guys got a lot of, big pay cut, and that's a lot of people left. So, it's unfortunate, but it is, you can't stay on top all the time. And you have to be ready. I knew that the big wave I was riding wasn't gonna keep going forever. So I was fortunate enough and smart enough to, use the money that I was getting paid, and I'm comfortable. I'm blessed. I have a wonderful family and wife, and life is good.
Well, that's, like I said before, that's all you can ask for, is to be happy in life with,
Absolutely.
What you got going on.
And health.
And going back, what's that?
And having good health.
Exactly. Now going back to WCW, you brought in, you were actually the key in bringing in two big members from Japan, into the NWO, and that was Masahiro Chono and the Great Muta.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let me tell you a little quickly. When the NWO Japan was the biggest angle, financially and otherwise, for New Japan. We sold, we grossed over $5 million in sale of NWO T-shirt in Japan, which is insane. They were selling those T-shirts, those black T-shirts that says NWO. Was selling those in Japan for about $35. And this is 20 years ago. And people will come into
arena.
arena.
Oh, I remember them shirts. I had one.
Yeah, people come into arena and buy a ticket and just, I'm talking about a non-wrestling fan, will buy like a 10 T-shirt and leave. They didn't even watch the show. I mean, that's how, he got bigger than wrestling fans. So it was a huge angle for them. And really, even to this day, Mr. Chono has his own clothesline, and he has licensed NWO stuff from WWE, and he still sells to current day. Right now, you go to his store, and he still sells NWO stuff, even to this day. And
you still see it, and it doesn't hurt the fact that when WWE brought the NWO back, they brought it back into relevance.
Right. No, it's
I mean, it never had the same luster, but.
Right. Well, in Japan, Great Muta, who was two of the biggest stars, and you got to remember, I got double crossed by Chono, and I got double crossed by Muta. So that's the beginning of NWO Japan, and so I was very much involved in that angle or beginning of that angle. And so, I like I said, looking at things in retrospect, I was blessed to be involved in one of the biggest angle and certainly Japanese wrestling history and be part of American wrestling history.
Well, speaking of Japan, I know at one point you were, it's obvious, the biggest name that you managed was Ultimo Dragon. In terms of longevity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember when he had the J Crown Championship, and he lost the J Crown to Jushin Liger, while still remaining Cruiserweight Champion. Now, I read about this. I didn't actually see this. I'm really curious. Clash of the Champions, 34. A botched interference on your part. What exactly was supposed to happen, and what went down for the listeners that aren't sure what we're talking about?
Well, actually, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'm not sure. There was a match that was it was wrestling. The match was for was it a junior belt? The New Japan's junior belt, was it not right? Am I right?
Yeah, the J Crown.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if there was any. I think everything went down like it's supposed to.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure about that. I wanted to get your take on it because this was something I read a couple years ago, and because it was leading into me talking about the championships with Ultimo Dragon and his feud with Dean Malenko, and I remember him, me reading about a match between him and Liger. But
I think as far as I remember is everything went down like it's supposed to.
Oh, okay, yeah, I wasn't too sure, so I figured I'd ask,
Yeah.
So. And I have to say, speaking of Ultimo Dragon, one of his best feuds that I've seen with you guys all involved in was definitely him and Malenko. I'm sure it was definitely fun for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Oh, no. I was going to say, with that, that was, if I'm not mistaken, that was considered one of the feuds of the year back in '96.
Yeah. Well, here's what it was. Once we got Dean Malenko and Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, they were the top cruiserweight guys from New Japan, and along with Kanemoto, Jushin Thunder Liger, those were the New Japan guys, and Ultimo Dragon. Now, Ultimo Dragon was not under New Japan contract. Inoki had an event in Los Angeles, and they had booked a Chris Jericho and Ultimo Dragon on that same show. and Eric and I was there, and that's when we said, hey, we need to get these guys because because we already had made a deal with New Japan about getting the Malenko and Guerrero and Benoit under our contract. They can't wrestle each other, all the time. So we needed to get more, cruiserweight talent, and that's when the matter of fact, that's when Eric got exposed to some of the luchadors like Psychosis, La Parca, and of course Rey Mysterio, and that's when they got, those are the group of people that we use when we put them under our contract to create, the wrestling that was not happening on other television shows. WWE have tendency to be bigger than life guys.
Right.
So we had, we still had that segment on television show, but if you remember, many of the second hour television of Nitro was started with cruiserweight going after cruiserweight. It was the Dean Malenko versus Ultimo Dragon, or Chris Jericho versus Chris Benoit, or everybody from Prince Ikea
to versus Psychosis. Right.
Right. And
a lot of that I think is because. Oh, go ahead.
No, reason why he did that was because the Raw was starting on our second hour, so we wanted to. You didn't need a storyline to watch Rey Mysterio wrestle Psychosis and just be awed by the matches. You didn't need to know why they were fighting each other. So there was no introduction needed. You know what I mean? And
that's what I was going to say, because I remember, at that time I'm 33 now, so I was in my early teens at that point, and I remember watching Nitro the first hour, and then the second hour I would flip back and forth, and then the third hour of wrestling that night would be WWE, well, WWF at the time.
Right.
So I remember, them doing the cruiserweights to keep the attention at that point.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So and of course, I had opportunity to to manage because of once when Medusa came over, Medusa needed opponent that she can have matches with. There wasn't a lot of American talent at the time who could go the All Japan women's style wrestling. So we brought in Akira Hokuto, Bon Nakano, Chigusa Nagayo, and we brought the top Japanese wrestlers, women wrestlers, into the WCW.
Right, because American women's wrestling, it started getting somewhere, and then it died out in the 90s, and it started it's nowhere near what it is now. I think right now the women's, I'll just say it this way, women's revolution, women's wrestling is probably at its pinnacle point right now.
Yeah, before, I think in early in WWE and even during the period that we were competing, they weren't showcasing their wrestling ability. It was a lot of TNA,
right.
And unfortunately, that's what they were selling back then. Now we have athletes and women who can work and actually do some phenomenal wrestling, So for that matter, it's I agree with you. It is better now.
And I got to say, and you mentioned the Japanese style with the women. I think it's great seeing a woman like Asuka, coming over from Japan and being as dominant. She's looking to break Goldberg's undefeated streak.
Yeah, and you know what? And you're absolutely right. Too bad they can't really showcase her. And once again, this is part of the unfortunate thing. Even Nakamura is going to have some issues because they don't speak English. So when you have a television show, unlike Japanese wrestling, you don't really need to speak over there because it's so and so versus so and so, and you just want to watch because they're gonna give you a phenomenal match. So the interview
right,
part,
they concentrate on the athleticism as opposed to the entertainment. Well, the story. They concentrate on the athleticism as opposed to storylines.
Right, and it's hard to create a storyline by just announcer talking about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so people like young lady like Asuka, who is phenomenal, of physical talent, that only going to take her to a certain degree till she can get maybe get a good manager or somebody who can help her to get over the hump.
Right.
And
rumors are speculating.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, rumors are speculating that there's actual talks of them bringing Paul Heyman in as having her to be Paul Heyman's first official Heyman woman, so to speak, and putting him as a mouthpiece.
Yeah, well, that's what it needs. I mean, certainly Paul will be probably one of the best out there to be able to do that. So
right.
I mean, back in the days, that's the part that I played when I, and of course I moved down, was Japanese to wrestler, from Yuji Nagata to Ultimo Dragon to to a certain point, I managed Psychosis, La Parca, El Dandy, all those luchadors, once again, being a mouthpiece. Now, it was a totally different deal when I was with Ernest, when I hooked up with Ernest. And Ernest and I hooked up because, we have legit martial art background. We used to travel the circuit together.
Right.
And I kind of played the, I certainly didn't speak for Ernest, and certainly Ernest doesn't need a mouthpiece. So I was just a little sidekick, kind of little comedy relief for him, and I was the reason why he
was what they said, back then. It was like Rush Hour. You were Jackie Chan, he was Chris Tucker.
Yeah, and it was fun. We matter of fact, I was down last week. I was down in Atlanta with Ernest on a photo shoot for a project we're doing, and Ernest and I would probably talk to each other, a couple times a week, and we stay in close touch because of, not because of wrestling so much, but because of what we experienced together, and certainly because of our martial arts, background.
Right, and he's a guy that, like, I would love to have on the show. I've always been a fan of his persona in ring, and like you said, the martial arts abilities. So maybe one day I'll be able to catch him on Twitter or something.
Yeah.
But no, like you said, you started branching off into. Well, before we jump to this, you were a part of basically the last running of a women's championship run in WCW, and that was the title versus career match with. I don't know if I'm saying this right. Hokuto.
Akira Hokuto. Yeah. She's a big time
Hokuto.
television personality now in Japan. I mean, she's like really big.
Really?
Right? Yeah. She's one of the big time television personality for major televisions in Japan right now, and she has been for like the last 5-6 years.
Right. Oh, that's really cool. I'm gonna have to look her up on like IMDb and see what she's got going out there, and if I can find anything, that'd be really cool to see.
Yeah.
And you, like I said, you ended up being involved in that. Now, what was the reason behind them? You see, since she was the last ever, WCW Women's Champion, whatever happened? Why didn't they progress with the women's division?
Well, I find this to be really unfortunate. The deal, and I always, I talk to Debbie Medusa often about it when we do talk about back the days. The deal was that there was going to be 3 matches, and Hokuto has won the first one, Hokuto won the second one, and right after that, we had made the arrangement to take that match back to Japan, and Medusa was going to win the match back home. When I say back home, back in Japan, which would have been a huge big news, and that never happened because it was already planned. Everything was in the works, except that match never took place because that's when, right at the end of 2000, that's when I went away and Eric was already gone, and that's basically what happened. And unfortunately for Medusa, you know, and either fortunately or what, Akira Hokuto is forevermore will be the WCW women champion or last women champion in history.
And I'll tell you what, she's a hell of an in-ring competitor, though, so she definitely deserves it. I mean, Medusa's won her championships. I mean, hell, Medusa turned around and was the first to drop a bombshell on Nitro when she dropped the women's championship in the garbage.
Yeah, that's right.
You know,
that's
right. I will never forget that. I mean, I'm sure you've seen her get inducted. She even brought back the women's championship, so to speak, and said, "Oh, here,
right.
you guys can have this back now," which I thought was hilarious.
Right.
But there's a lot of people that go under the radar, so to speak, and Hokuto was probably one of them because the last she was seen in America was, after that feud.
Yeah, and she went back to Japan and had, probably wrestled for another year or so, but she retired, went into television, and like I said, and she's one of the biggest television personality in Japan. I mean, she's on the morning shows and she's pretty amazing right now.
Well, speaking of other people that were pretty amazing, you mentioned I have to ask. Unfortunately, you're the first person I get to ask this. You mentioned, knowing Chris Benoit. Can I get your take on the whole situation? Your opinion as to whether he did, whether he didn't. The whole. Because my opinion is there's no way he could have done it. But he's forever going to be blacklisted from anything now because of the situation, and it's a shame because people tend to look past what they do in their personal or see what they do in their personal life behind closed doors and seem to forget what they did in the public eye in terms of accolades and their careers and whatever it may be. So, can we talk a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I can only tell you my experience with Chris. Very nice guy. I mean, we traveled. Matter of fact, I was just in Japan, like I said, a week ago, and stayed at the Tokyo Dome Hotel, and there's Sizzlers there where all the boys ate there because they have like a smorgasbord kind of, a place, and boys can eat all they can eat. So it's frequented by because it's just down a hall from where they're staying, right next to the Korakuen Hall. So the boys generally stays there. And my last memory that I have is Eddie, myself, and Chris. We were there and we got caught in a hurricane. And we got stuck there actually. Everything was closed all over Tokyo, and so we could eat in the hotel, and Sizzler was there. That's one of the last time I sat down and had dinner with him. And that and my experience traveling in Japan with this great young man. I mean, this is before the women's angle. All that stuff happened after that. I spoke to him certainly,
right?
But it's one of the time that we spent time together, and I do remember Chris calling me. This is when the angle became a shoot between Kevin Sullivan's then wife woman. Left him and they were traveling together and what we were talking about earlier, that became a shoot. And of course, he ended up marrying a woman and I remember him calling me when all that stuff was going on and I remember Chris called me just to explain to me that why it went down like that, and he was there to protect her because, according to him, Kevin was, and I'm sure he got this from her, that Kevin was kind of abusing her, and like I said, this is all hearsay, and
right.
Chris was only there to protect her, and so it's not like, what do you think he was? I didn't steal anybody's wife. He was trying to explain that to me, and I said to Chris, listen, it doesn't affect anything how I feel about you or our friendship. It is what it is. I mean, things happen in life. I mean, so it's not
right.
gonna.
It's one of those. It's one of those. What you do is what you do, but we're good.
Yeah, and but he was, he was concerned enough to call me of how I felt about the situation.
Right.
So that's the kind of guy he was. You know what I mean? So he was concerned how people, at least he cared about, and I'm assuming that he cared about how I thought about him. So he made an effort to call me and explain to me what was going on. So
right.
So having said that, obviously, he went to WWE, and we weren't in touch with each other for the longest time. But so what happened after he went there, different situation. It's hard for me to believe that the horrible, or for that matter, anybody can do something that horrible.
Right.
As they say that he did. It's hard for me to believe that, but is that inconceivable? I think you have to be literally mentally ill, affected somehow. It wasn't the Chris Benoit that I knew,
right.
by any stretch of the word. If he did do, if he did do what they say he did, it can't be the same person that I knew.
Gotcha. Well, Speaking of, people doing things or whether they did or didn't, this actually brings me to my next question, because I know we're coming down to the quarter mark on the hour.
Okay.
The downfall of WCW. I know Eric left or wasn't with or wasn't in charge anymore with the company. By Eric, I mean Eric Bischoff.
Eric
Russo was running things.
Right around September.
Okay.
September of '99.
Yeah, because we discussed this a little bit before we were on air. What do you think happened? And I understand that there was quite a few people involved in some kind of lawsuit over contract negotiations. Can you shed a little light on that whole downfall situation?
You talking about my lawsuit?
From my understanding, there were quite a few wrestlers. Aside from you, there was a couple African American wrestlers. There was a racial discrimination lawsuit.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was not a class action suit or anything. It was all separate. There was probably a dozen people that sued WCW at the time.
Right.
So it was all separate lawsuits. Mine was particularly different because I was not a worker. One, two, I worked in office. I had a corporate American Express card. I had a CNN pass. I had, a computer and pager that was issued to me by the office, which no other wrestler has any of that stuff like that. So I worked in office, and yet I was I was deemed as an independent contractor. Well, I should have been an employee. So that was a big issue between, was I employee or was I independent contractor? Well, when you're an independent contractor, the company don't have to pay you, your everything from health care to, you get paid 1099. So no tax are taken out of you, and the company doesn't have to contribute to, your taxes and that kind of thing. That was one of the biggest issues. But the reason I had just signed a contract in November of '99, and Vince Russo came in. There was a coup in office that, and it's a hearsay. I mean, I did hear from a couple other officers in the company that they kind of created a coup and ousted Eric in September of '99. So Eric was let go.
And I know that you and Eric, from what I've heard and I've seen in the past, you and Eric were pretty good friends, or still are.
Yeah, we're still real good tight friends. You know, we've known each other before wrestling. People, you know, and one of the reasons why Eric went into wrestling is because of something Eric and I was doing at the time. If you get his DVD, you'll explain all that by the Ninja Star Wars, the game I created, and that kind of thing. But anyway, but Eric was already gone. They brought a guy named by Vince Russo in, and he made a public statement on the CNN or on the WCW platform. He was from America, and he didn't want any Japanese or any Mexican on his television. And
basically a real racial comment, more or less.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can say, I don't want Sonny Onoo on television. You can say you don't want Ernest Miller on television, but you can't say you don't want any Japanese or you don't want any Mexican, and proceeded to terminate all those guys.
Right. It's not like he's singling out one specific person. He went and singled out a whole nationality, so to speak.
Right. Well, yeah. You know, according to him, anything that wasn't American was not going to be on television. And you know, you can do a lot of things, but you can't be that stupid to say things like that publicly.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Especially now, more so in this day and age. But I mean, it's one of those things that a lot of people credit the downfall of WCW, and all fingers pointed at Vince Russo.
Well, you know, his booking didn't make a lot of sense. He cheapened the belt by putting a strap on you know. I think he did the
David
Buff
Arquette.
Bagwell's mom was Buff Bagwell's mom was at one point as a champion.
Oh Jesus.
Yeah,
I remember that and the Viagra on a pole match,
right?
And let's give David Arquette a world championship.
Right. So, you know, I mean, I'm not saying anything about. I mean, just those are just yours and my opinion, but you know, I mean, obviously, ratings shows that a lot of the fans kind of tuned away from all that stuff.
I'll admit, I was one of them. We watched it less and less back in the latter years of it, you know, in 99 and 2000, because the matches were just ridiculous.
Yeah, and you know, end of the day, you know, you can't have people who came up on Life of a Carney and put them in charge of a corporate situation. So they'll say stupid things, just like what we mentioned before. You know, you may be able to get away with that.
Well, I was going to say, it was almost like a case of how a lot of people stated it was more like the inmates running the prison back in the latter years. Yeah,
absolutely. And you know, but you know, it is what it is, and far as that goes, you know, the lawsuit was settled, and you know, we're all certainly better for it, and you know, Russo is where he belongs, and you know, I'm happy with everything that you know that came out of the deal.
Well, that is definitely good on your part. Well, speaking of the deals, you know, I know Vince bought up WCW because, you know, I know Eric had financial backing and everything, but I believe it was AOL or Warner Brothers, whoever it was that bought out TNA, didn't want wrestling on the time slots anymore, so they couldn't find a network to house them. And there was when I spoke with Dave Penzer yesterday, he mentioned that, you know, a lot of guys were brought in for a 15-minute interview and saying that we're gonna do a WCW show still, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen yet. Were you by any chance one of the guys that were brought in, or was there any talks of, when Ultimo Dragon went to WWE as to whether or not, you could be his manager, or was it just once the company folded, you were done altogether?
No, like I was already gone by then. I was already gone because WCW kind of went on till about 2001.
Right.
So I was already off television. I did kind of help Ultimo Dragon because that's one of the things that he wanted to do was go work for, WWE. And so, Kaz Hayashi went over there as well. So there's a couple of Japanese talent that was on the WCW contract. Of course, Yuji Nagata went back to Japan. But yeah, those two guys did go work over at WWE. I did have a conversation at one point to go work there, to manage a Japanese talent, but I knew he wasn't going to be the same. And
right.
in retrospect, I know a lot of guys that was on the WCW banner that went over there, didn't fare very well, and had many difficult times. I think there was a residual effect of, you're still the enemy kind of thing when people went over there. Now, I'm only speaking from, what people have told me that went over there,
I can definitely agree because I've seen it. I've seen it happen, and it was almost like they were burying those guys. And unless you dealt with the quote-unquote hazing process and pulled through it on top, like guys like Booker T, even DDP, stuff like that, you really didn't get far.
Out of all the people that went over there doing from WCW to WWE, I think only real person that really did okay, did pretty good was Booker T.
Right.
Some of the things that Eric, was put through when he went over there, it was hard for me to watch. So
just fully understandable because, like you said, it was like you guys are the enemy, and now you're going to work for us. You're going to have to take the abuse.
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like that. Those are the things that I heard from some of the boys that went over there, and maybe that's how they felt. And maybe that's not the real case. I don't know. I wasn't there, but that's certainly the feeling some of the guys got. Unfortunately.
Right.
So
a guy that I can turn around and see as, unless you came over during the midst of the Monday Night Wars like Guerrero, Malenko, Saturn, and even Saturn started to go downhill. Guys like Jericho, unless you came over then, it was tough for you to make something of yourself there. A prime example, in my opinion, was DDP. I mean, DDP came into his own. I mean, and you've seen it firsthand. But then when he came to WWE finally, they brought him in as this stalker gimmick. And in my opinion, it's like, what are they doing with this guy? Let him come in and be him.
Yeah. No, you know what? But you have to, and I agree with what you said. But the best thing ever happened was to a Page is that here's a man who I respect, and the kind of in a backhand way is that this man, despite all the disadvantages of being old wrestler, started out as a manager, being, he came on, he didn't start out when he was young, and he didn't make it till he was older.
He started at an older age than I am now.
And he got to the top of the game, however he did at WCW, and then he went on, to had a somewhat a career at WWE, and now he certainly has reinvented himself with DDP Yoga, and here's a man who has absolutely 100% of my respect because he reinvents himself. He's the best self-promoting machine that I know, and he has utmost respect for me.
And it's funny, he's actually originally from my neck of the woods.
Is that right?
Yeah, he's from the Jersey Shore. But on that note, we're cutting down on time. It was great having you, Sonny. I would love to have you back, in the future at some point and talk more about, some of your highlights in WCW, some of the insights going on and everything, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely. I can tell you some funny and scary stories.
I would love it. I will definitely be in touch then. But I understand you got some things that you'd like to plug and promote, so the mic is all yours, sir.
Yeah. Well, listen. It's like I said, I get to do a lot of fun things at this point in my life, and one of the things I'm doing is the thing called Fight TV, FITE. You can download the app on your phone, and you get to watch a lot of free wrestling from and wrestling from all over the world. As I mentioned earlier, I'm bringing All Japan into that program. Wrestle One with Muda and Kaz Hayashi, and so there's going to be a lot of wrestling that you don't get to see on a weekly basis. You get to see on the Fight TV, along with a lot of MMA shows and some. We just did Lafayette fighting from Japan, which is bare knuckle Thai boxing, which is, you can imagine, they have 98% knockout rate. And so those amazing combative arts, combative entertainment like wrestling, Ryzen shows, some of the K1 stuff will be coming on. So there's so many stuff on there. When you go, if you download the app, you can find yourself, be able to watch a lot of that stuff free. So, and I'll be bringing content from all over the world to put on Fight TV. So, and I get, I get a great job. I get to go out and look for, phenomenal combative arts to introduce to a worldwide audience. So, like I said, it's like having a cake and eat it too.
You can't beat that. And from my understanding, also, I would like to direct people to your car dealership.
Yeah, I have a company called
if you want to tell them where that's at.
Yeah, I live in a small town in Iowa, northern Iowa, in Mason City, Iowa, and we specialize in finding vehicles for people. So if you need a Lamborghini or Rolls Royce, or if you just need a Pontiac G6, I can find you whatever you need. But it's a fun thing I do. I get to travel, so I try not to have a vocation. I try to have fun and be able to make a couple bucks and make everybody happy. That's my deal.
Thank you very much, Sonny, and we definitely look forward to speaking to you again. And ladies and gentlemen, you can hear this on YouTube in the next couple days. Sonny, I will definitely tag you in it. You can follow us on Body Slam the Comp at Twitter. You can follow us on BodySlamTheCompetition.com on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at Body Slam the Competition. And if you have any questions or want anybody that you'd like to hear on here, you can tweet me at Jetsman84. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you again, Sonny. Look forward to speaking to you in the future. And everybody, enjoy your weekend.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sonny. Enjoy.